Welcome to San Antonio's Influence Magazine show, the premier talk show where we introduce you to influential individuals doing significant work in the city of San Antonio and surrounding areas. Celebrate the spirit of business, leadership, and innovation. If this is your first time joining us and you'd like more information, you could find us at influencesa.com. That's influencesa.com. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and for this particular episode of the show, all future and past episodes of the show, pull up your YouTube search bar, toss in San Antonio's Influence Magazine show. When you get there, please subscribe, give us a like or a thumbs up, and hit that bell so that you don't miss any future episodes of the show. Welcome to the show, folks. I'm your host, Cedric Fisher. Today we're joined by a local leader and author whose reach spans all things finance, community service, and storytelling. Ed Polansky, author of the Oscar the Osprey series and current chairman of the board at RBFCU, uses his work to bridge the gap between business and creativity. With decades of experience in public service and organizational leadership, he manages to bring clarity and executive discipline to his authoring career, providing young readers and their families with valuable life lessons. Stay tuned, and when we come back, we'll meet Ed Polansky.
Every child faces a moment when fear feels bigger than courage. For Oscar the Osprey, that moment comes every single day. Oscar the Osprey, the bird who was afraid of heights. Oscar is a bird designed to soar through the mountain skies of the Teton Range. But there's one problem. He's absolutely terrified of heights. While his brother Otto and sister Oprah fly effortlessly, Oscar freezes at the edge of the nest, gripped by the very fear his nature was meant to overcome. After harrowing trials, including a run-in with a pack of wolves, Oscar discovers the most important lesson of all. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing to try anyway. Through patience, encouragement, and one brave decision at a time, Oscar learns that his wings were always strong enough. He just needed to believe. From children's author Edward Martin Polansky comes a story Kirkus Reviews calls a must-have for families, schools, and communities. With black and white illustrations by award-winning artist Jean Rosow, Oscar's journey teaches children ages 6 to 8 that being brave means flying even when you're scared. Oscar the Osprey, the bird who was afraid of heights, because every child deserves to know they're braver than they think. Available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Powell's, and Walmart. Give your child the gift of courage.
Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Cedric.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your background, where you're from, and kind of come forward.
Well, I grew up in Corpus Christi. That was my hometown. Got very interested in math in that regard, and that sort of led me to the career that I ended up doing. Went to University of Texas in Austin, got my degree in accounting. Went to Houston, joined the firm. At that time it was one of the big 8 firms. Now they're called the Big 4. Arthur Young, and I started there and was there for about 10 or 12 years. Got my certificate and started out in the auditing side, ended up in the tax side, and then when they opened the San Antonio office, I came over to San Antonio. That was about 1980, so it's been a long time ago. I'm a native San Antonio now. And then we started the office. We went through mergers, and over the years the names changed. We merged ultimately with Ernst and Winnie, and then became Ernst & Young, and I was there for a few more years before I went out on my own. So that's kind of the beginning, and then ultimately had my own firm and with some partners, and we ultimately merged in with another regional firm, and that's what led to my ultimate retirement from the consulting, the technical side of the business. And since then I've been doing some work for my old clients and and consulting with the management of smaller accounting firms. But for the most part, I'm kind of out of that at this point and involved in more public services. So that's kind of where I am right at the moment.
Okay. So you've got a background in accounting, and at some point you decided you wanted to author.
Yeah, well, the accounting got me into the sort of the public arena because every nonprofit is looking for accounting help. And so that's kind of what led me into that. And I've been through a number of those, the Area Foundation, San Antonio Area Foundation, and then KLRN, and then finally with credit union, RBFCU. So it's a kind of long trail, but one led kind of to the other one. Everything kind of went in some kind of sequence.
Okay. So you're currently an author of a children's book series called Oscar the Osprey. Talk to us about the inspiration and why did you particularly choose Oscar?
That roots go way back. When I was in Corpus growing up, my first job, and I was there for almost 5 years working in the public library. And so that allowed me to really get into books and saw all the departments. And one of the departments I worked in was in the children's department. It was the one everybody hated because it was always a mess. You know, the kids come in, mess up all the books and whatever. And I did start reading some of those books, and I wasn't really very inspired with that until I ran across Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss.
And Dr. Seuss, you know, I thought, this guy really knows what he's doing because he's writing books on 3 levels. He's writing a book for a child who can't read. He's writing a book for a child when he is able to read. He reads it at another level. And then he writes them so it appeals to the adults who buy the books. So I thought that was really creative. And a lot of the other books I didn't really find much inspiration because they seem to be talking down to kids. But Dr. Seuss, he seemed to be talking in a lot of ways morally, and he had of course he was an artist, so he was tremendous in connection with his artistry side. And but it was three levels, and I said, you know, maybe someday if I ever have a chance to write a book, I'd like to write a book on the levels that he wrote. And I got interested now, because I remember in the 3rd grade that after lunch they would read a book to us, these chapter books, and I thought those were really, really fun times. I really enjoyed that, and that always stuck with me. So I had this desire, maybe someday, and I've learned this I've talked to a lot of people have that, someday I'm going to write a children's books. Mm. And there's a lot of them out there. And so it took an inspiration to do that. And that finally came years later, though, when we were on a trip and we went to into Colorado Springs in the Royal Gorge. Royal Gorge is a suspension bridge over the Arkansas River, and there's 1,000 feet down. And the reason we went there in the first place is when I was a kid, there used to be a television program called You Ask For It. And this one, somebody had asked for a bungee jumper to jump off that bridge. And they did it. I thought that was really fascinating. And that's what made me realize that we want to go to do that someday on the trip.
So you wanted to go jump off?
No, that wasn't it at all. but there was a marker on the bridge where apparently it all happened.
Sure.
And it's a suspension bridge, so it sways like this. They're planks across. You can see down 1,000 feet, and it's a little bit disconcerting. And my son at that time is 13. He's 50 some now. He said, "Boy, it would really suck if you were a bird and you're afraid of heights," because he had some acrophobia, and I have some too. And I thought, now that would be an interesting storyline. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to see about doing something, and talking to my wife, whatever. And I said, I'm going to think that's a story that's worth kind of talking, because you can come with a moral story there about overcoming hurdles in life and handicaps and things like that. And then I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, what I write. Just, we had just been to the Tetons on that trip, Grand Tetons, and went to a place called Jenny Lake. Beautiful place, surrounded by mountains, beautiful lake, and everything around it is just unbelievable. And we had gone on a ranger walk. I'd always liked to go to ranger talks. My kids hated it, but whenever we go to a state park, we go, or a national park, we go to ranger talks. And there was one that gave us a walk around that river, that lake, and it was a lady ranger, and she said, "Look at that osprey flying over," and we all looked up, and she said, "Notice that it has a fish in its talons, and its talons are faced this way to reduce drag, because it's easier to fly with the head far." Mm-hmm. And it kind of stuck, and my wife said, "What about osprey?" And so, when I got home, by that time I had gotten an Apple II Plus. There's no way I could write using a typewriter. Mm-hmm. But an Apple II Plus had a Word program in there. Well, it was way back there. This is in the early 80s.
Yeah, we remember those.
And,
sure.
And I sat down not knowing where the stories was going. And the way I've always written was, hey, throw it on there and edit it later. And so I didn't know how it was going to end. And so when I got towards the end, the inspiration came. And that's where that kind of got it all started. But it took, as you know, it took years and years and years later to actually get it published. That was in the early 80s. This book wasn't officially published until 2015. So,
okay.
Hobbies take a long time sometimes.
So there's 6 books in the series
Yes.
currently. And the first was published in 2015?
Yes.
Okay.
Formally published. I had done an informal one prior to that as a fundraising thing where we did it ourselves, and that turned out to be successful in that sense. So I thought, well, someday. But publishing had changed in that period of time. In the old days, if you published independently, you had to publish 1,000 books or to make it worthwhile for the publisher. Well, today everything is published on demand. So, it's relatively easy to write your own book nowadays. Get it published.
Sure.
If you want to go traditional or that sort of thing, it's almost impossible, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it all got started.
It's a fantastic book. It's a good read for all ages, by the way. So what are some of the themes that you try to integrate into the books, particularly so that children can hear it?
Well, it's really, I didn't have the idea of doing 6 books when I started this. I just wanted to do one. And it was a pretty easy theme. It was, how does, people with handicaps, how do they overcome it? How do they get there? And I wanted to find a way that Oscar solved the problem. The problem was, since they lived in this canyon in the Tetons and they have to migrate every year, since he couldn't fly high, he was left behind. So the question was, how is he going to survive and that sort of thing. And I came up with the idea in the book. It wasn't magic, it was something he figured out. He was able to deal with his handicap. That was an easy beginning because I thought that's a really strong moral story. And so that was it. But in the process of doing the first book, I got an idea, because it was him and his siblings, I got an idea for his brother. And so the second one had a different theme, moral, and then I said, well, maybe I ought to do a trilogy. And that was for his sister. We didn't raise any daughters, so I didn't know much about raising daughters, so I had to come up with a theme there. And that came from talking to a lot of my friends who had daughters, and they have different issues than boys.
They do.
And that was the one that's
a fact.
Got that one. And then when I finished that one, the idea was, what am I going to do? And so I tried to go through the process of how you develop leadership, and that's where the rest of the books are kind of talking about wisdom with experience, and how people work together in order to achieve something. And in the end, that was part of the process that led to the 6 books. I had no plan to do six books. But what got me thinking is I really would like to get to traditional publishers. I'd like to get a traditional agent and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, if I had an inventory, maybe that'd be better than having one pony kind of storyline. So yeah. They all kind of led together, but it was all a hobby. It wasn't something that I was doing that was going to be my future career. And I was getting the age where, that sort of was not in the cards. But really what it kind of led to some degree was a discussion one time I had with a really good friend, was a psychologist. We grew up together, we went off to college together, and all that time he was, basically I was his patient. He gave me all the psychological tests and all those kinds of things. Yeah. And I remember asking him one time, I can't sit down with my boys and tell them what I believe and them to understand it. And his comment was, it's not what you say, it's what you do. That's what they learn from. And so this was a way to kind of put some of my philosophies in print that would be left for them someday when they had the urge to read about it. So there's a lot of different elements to this process.
And one of the motivations was legacy, to have something.
Absolutely, for my kids.
Right.
Not that I expected to be some kind of famous author or whatever. It was more of, I want to leave thoughts and ideas and what I believe as some kind of guidance and something. Because you don't sit down and write a list of, here's what I believe in and this is what you guys need to do. They learn what you really believe by watching what you do. And that's really part of the deal. And besides, I like to write, so it was a hobby, and it was serving a function of, at least I was putting my thoughts down and through the characters of the deal. But the real key was getting a good illustrator, actually.
Yeah.
And that was really key to the process. Once that happened, because that gave me the encouragement to go forward, because they were willing to work with me. They liked the story, and so that was very encouraging. So I had a lot of that.
Let's give a shout out to your illustrator, Miss Jean
Rosow. She's a resident of San Antonio. Her husband was her father-in-law was a really famous CPA in San Antonio, very successful. And we got to know each other, and I talked to him for various times. And one time I raised the issue, so I'm looking for an illustrator because we got to talking about the books. And he said, "You need to talk to my daughter-in-law," and we've been friends ever since. She's done them all, and she's just a great watercolorist. But she's really good at pen and ink, black and white. And I like that because that's more of a retro back to when I was talking about. They read these chapter books to us in the third grade. They're just black and white sketches. And one of the things I always fear about today's children's books is they're all totally splashed with color. It's all about visual, and the imagination isn't necessarily an element of that. But when you do pen and ink, there's some creativity in their minds in connection with that. So I'm a little somewhat critical of children's books of today, but I'm not an expert, so.
You've been an executive for major corporations in telecommunications, investment, and finance. How did you make the transition from that sort of a profession or calling to a children's book author?
Well, a lot of my ideas came from that. The ideas of trust, and probably one of the first things I learned in my business when I became an auditor, and so I was able to look at people like that. I got to learn a lot about various clients. Then I became a tax person, but ultimately I became a financial planner. And what I realized that I know more about people's personal financial information than they probably do, or anybody else in the world. And so there's a real responsibility there for confidentiality, and the advice I give them is really important to their long-term life. And that's what really fascinated me about and that leads to me developing a lot of my personal values and whatever. And the best, in our business, the CPAs, the only thing we have to sell aside from experience, is trust. And if you're not trustworthy, then you're really, you're not going to help people. You're not a look. One of the big characters I've learned in this, and that's why I'm going nonprofits, is really you got to have the greater good as your objective, not your own personal benefit.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that greater good, you're of no good to other people. You're only, you're going to seek everything that you want and what you think is best, and I think that's you've lost something in that regard. So, learning that came a lot from the experience I've had and the failures I've seen, and the problems the families have in connection with their wealth. And I mean, one of the first clients I worked with is a situation where the son sued the mother after the father died.
Oh no!
And you start to realize that money is good, and it can be really terrible in terms of family relationships. You see that a lot in people who win the lottery. They win the lottery and they lose it all.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I learned a lot of lessons in my profession.
So trust, confidentiality, transparency, maybe.
Absolutely. Well, there's a big one right there, because the problem with this one for lawsuit was there was no sitting down with the kid and the mother and the father and talking about what the situation was. This is how we're doing. This is what we have in assets. This is your mother's. This is yours. None of that was done, and so that was something I learned very early: is getting the parties together and talking about it. Not only just the client and their family, but getting the the person who does the trust, the banker, the attorney, the accountant. If you don't get them all together, it's not going to be coordinated.
Yeah. So getting them all around the table and getting them talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
How about any other unexpected skills that you found you could transfer to?
Well, what I learned, you think being a CPA is a very detailed-oriented profession, and you need those kind of people around, but I'm not that detailed. Mm-hmm. So the trick for it was being able to work with other people and take advantage of other people's skills, not have the attitude that a lot of people have, and this was the only person who can do it the way I want it is me. You don't train anybody, you don't bring anybody along, and one of the things I learned is that using other people to accomplish what you're trying to do. I don't know it all, but when we bring a number of people together that have different skills,
yeah,
you can achieve a heck of a lot more. So
teamwork makes the dream work.
It's absolutely key.
Yeah.
Yep.
No doubt about it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Ed Polansky.
I don't remember how it started. Our back and forth. Victory. Fumble. Repeat. It always came back.
Okay, here we go, throw it! Yeah.
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Nice.
You're currently chairman of the board at Randolph Brooks Federal Credit Union. What are some of the values that guide your leadership there, and how can those translate into your writing?
Well, I have to give more history here. Back in the 80s, one of my practice areas was with savings and loans. And in the 80s in Texas, we had virtually a depression, and we must have done 35 savings and loans out of San Antonio. They all disappeared.
Oh, wow.
Because the industry was really not prepared for what took place at that point. Not only the industry, but the regulators or whatever, and it disappeared. A lot of the people I knew that ended up in credit unions because they're nonprofits, they're mutually owned, and the result of which is over the years, from one of my former partners was at Randolph Brooks. He was the CFO there. And he said, well, we're trying to form an advisory committee. Would you be interested in doing that? And because of the situation that I knew a lot about savings loans, I knew several of the people I knew were there at RBFCU. And so I went on, but what was different, that was a military-based credit union. Randolph and Brooks base, really that got started back in the, 50s, I guess. And so I was not ex-military. And so I was really unusual in that I came in, was involved in not being ex-military. And what I found is it ran like a military operation, which was not the way we run business operations. There's a difference. The result of it, although they were doing well, and I think what is unusual is I was the first non-military related person that ultimately became chair. And that came because the institution changed. It moved away from just being military to where they ended up with a credit union in Austin, and then they've gone up. We're moving into Oklahoma now in terms of the business. So it's the largest credit union in the state of Texas,
Randolph Brooks.
Randolph Brooks is,
How about
and
that? Okay.
almost in the top 10 in the country in terms of size of credit union. Credit unions are smaller than banks, but
USAA would be a bank, right? Or is
well,
it-
there is a USA Bank, but there is the nonprofit, which is the insurance side. And at one time they had a big management services group, which they sold off. So it started because a lot of the military going all over the world, they need some kind of institution that could follow them. And the credit unions were unique in that regard, and USA was unique in that it started as an insurance. That where do military people get insurance for their cars? Well, that was an institution that really grew from that. RBFCU is kind of that way too, but it's evolved, and I think my background in the business world has had an impact, and we have more people on the board now that are business related and that sort of thing. A lot of credit unions, because they're related to an industry, a company like Teachers Credit Union, the people on the board are teachers, and they're not business people, and so there's a limitation with what you can do it. But RBFC is involved in that, and because of that evolution is why I'm still there. But I'm getting close to the end. We've instituted term limits and all those kinds of things, which is appropriate to keep things fresh.
Okay.
So I've
you're
been involved in a lot of that.
You're coming to the end of your term, or?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
Is it close, or?
Yep, it is. I might be there for another year or two, but I've been on it for like 20 years. So,
Wow.
But now we have a limit, and it's so you don't go stale.
Sure.
You get stale in that.
Yeah, need new energy.
And those are things that have come from the business side that have melded into to nonprofits. It's really not a nonprofit. It makes money, but it's making money for its members. The people who have deposits there are really technically the owners of the institution. It's not a shareholder operation where the main directors are the shareholders as opposed to the people that you're serving. So credit unions are a very unique enterprise in that regard, and it's been a fun ride.
And you brought some of those values into your office.
Oh, well, and that's where it goes. Everywhere I've been, I've learned lessons, and I try to put as many as that I've learned in the books. And you notice the key person in the wisdom side is the owl, the wise old owl. Woo! And he's the one that observes and thinks and gives advice to all of the siblings, both Oscar and his siblings, and so he's a kind of common character through all the books. The way the books were intended to be written is there's a kind of a theme that's going through all 6 books that leads to something, but each book is a separate story, so that it completes itself, and then it's kind of like Harry Potter in the sense that there's a story in every movie in every book, but there's this constant theme that leads to the end with the end battle with with the evil. So that's kind of like the way I like series. When you see them in streaming, I like to have a story that finishes each episode. But that's just me.
Okay. Most authors, before they start writing, have an outcome that they're looking for from their readership, and at times it's a multiple outcome, I guess, or different things they want to impact the reader. They want to touch the reader. They want to move them to do something. What impact are you looking for?
Well, the turning point was mine. I had written the manuscript and was still struggling with finding an illustrator and whatever. I had a really good friend who was a teacher, 3rd grade, and she said, "Why don't you come read your manuscript to our kids?" It's because I was thinking I was directing it to 3rd and 4th graders. And so I did do that, and she had them all write letters back to me. I still have those letters.
Okay.
That were, they really enjoyed the story, and they were all worried about Oscar and all the things he went through. And that was a heck of a turning point in the process. I said, okay, I really need to do something with this. I just can't just leave it in this mode. And so it was really the thing that really drove me to finally doing something. And at one time I was the chair of the State Society CPAs. That's an organization of 25,000 people or whatever. And when you're chair, one of the things that that was when I got the Illustrator. We put together our own book and we sold it to earn money for the scholarships. And it really took off. But that was before you could easily, publish without a, traditional publisher. So it kind of died for another 15 years. But there were many steps in the process that kept it going. And actually, one of the quickest ones, the reason the last two of them were because of pandemic. I did 2 books during the pandemic because I was home not doing anything.
Yeah.
So it just feels like this was meant to be. I don't know whether there's any truth to that.
Switching back to your professional work, of course you're a professional author at this point too. What legacy or what do you want people to most remember about your work?
That's a really tough question, and I've kind of thought about what would be my vision for the end. And to some degree is one of the reasons I've been I've been running into the problems in publishing. And the number one problem for independents are the scams. They're out there. Thousands and thousands of predators out there. And your intellectual property is at risk. And so one of the big problems are places like the Philippines with there are no strong intellectual property rules and things like that. You see they're always after you, and some of them are legitimate in the sense that they have a program, but they're only appealing to your vanity. Our scouts have found your book. It's wonderful. We need to make a screenplay. We need to we want to be partners in that process, and you don't know who to believe. And it's really hard to find because there are people out there that are out to warn you, but you start looking at the list of all of the publishers you're not to deal with. You're talking thousands, and so what do you do? And I guess what I've kind of laid low and just sort of look from the standpoint of what I would really envision would be if I could get to a traditional publisher at some point in time, and it ends up in libraries, or it ends up, because see now everything is in the social media, and I know really very little about the social media, and that's where most of us in the author and the independents fail, because they don't have an effective social media in today's world.
Oh yeah.
So the vision would be, it'd be great if I could go traditional, not because I want my name, it's just I would like to share the thoughts in the books and get input from people to see was it meaningful to them? And I really have gotten a lot of that from friends and people that I have actually sold books to that
good reviews.
That basically they shared it with their children and they loved it, and the adults have liked the story. They're intended to be universal, not supposed to be what's today's big crisis. They're supposed to be universal things of growing up and becoming an adult and understanding what wisdom is and things like that.
Yeah, generational.
That's what you hope. You hope it doesn't. Like Dr. Seuss. You hope it's not a flash in the pan kind of thing.
Yeah. Children's books. You working on anything else, writing-wise?
Well, I've felt like I've reached the limit on these books. I've gotten to a point where I think that the series is complete, and so and as we've discussed, I've thought about doing short stories.
Okay.
Because I've got a book of Mark Twain's short stories, and I got a sense of what he's doing, and I'd like to share some of my experiences growing up through short stories, as opposed and to real people, not through characters and through animals, but through my eyes, in a sense. Yeah. I've done a little of that. I've got 8 or 9 ideas, and that's what I'd like to focus on for a while to see if any of those are worthwhile. So
sure,
that's my current direction.
What's been the greatest challenge in your new authoring career?
That there are a million children's book writers out there, and the people who would really treat your book properly, an agent in a traditional way, they don't need your books. They've got all they want. Because I've done that. I've submitted the story way back when I originally submitted it to publishers, and if you don't hit them exactly right, and you don't have I guess that's my publisher. I did it. They're not located here. I don't have any personal contact with anybody other than by phones and whatever. And it's really hard to develop that one-on-one that you would like to with an agent. So that's a heck of a challenge, and it's one in which a very small percentage of authors achieve, is my opinion.
We're going to take another break. We'll be right back.
My name's Stacy, I'm 57, and I was adopted in 2020.
We were adopted in 2019.
And we were adopted in 2021.
We had a house, and it sounds crazy, but it wasn't a home. The one thing that Jake and Emma brought is it became a home.
When I met Dakota, he had just turned 14.
You weren't there for the first this and the first that. I missed the first words, but we got a lot of other firsts.
Watching her say, oh my God, I cannot believe I got my license. And she's like, I passed. And I'm like, girl.
See them grow. It is.
They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
You and you. Kids in the middle.
What I thought was a complete life was nowhere near complete, but it is now.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit AdoptUSKids.org.
Ed, I'm going to ask you a question. You may have to think about this one, but what's the one thing that people don't know about you but should?
That should. I have thought about something like that. Is and I guess my
it could be
wife what my old wife says when she's talking about me, she says he's a CPA, but he's not a typical CPA.
Okay.
And I guess when I tell people that I've written some books, I mean it's like, it's like some kind of mystery that you would ever end up doing that sort of thing. But during my life, I've met people that are really good professionals, but they have these interesting hobbies. One in particular was a dentist, a really good friend of mine. He was a dental surgeon. He was wild into trains. He was a really successful dentist. A surgeon, and yet he ended up building model trains that he could run in his backyard. And I just was amazed that people have the time to do their professional and still develop something on the side that is really involved. And I think to a degree that kind of allowed me to open it up and says, maybe I can do this. But your career takes everything, and so in order to find that balance, you have to kind of come to grips with yourself. As advice I've given to other people, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be selective. And at one point I decided that one of the mentors I had when I worked in the public library were some librarians. And one in particular that I worked with, we were in the reference department. She was really smart. But I would always give her, when I had to write a paper, I'd give it to her. And she was so inspirational in connecting with, giving me the idea that I do look at things a little differently than other people. One of the things I learned because of my psychologist friend is in order to understand other people, you have to understand yourself first. And that's where that self-analysis and whatever. And very few people do that. You think how many people you deal with as you sit down and do what you're doing, asking questions. Most people don't ask questions back. Mm-hmm. If you notice that, and I thought, why is that? Well, aren't they curious? Aren't they interested in what's going on? But most people are not. Most people are not interested in really finding out really what you are or what you do. And that's kind of what I've always been driven to do, is why do people do what they do? And most of it is you can understand it if you can figure out why you would do that, then you understand them. And that's been really beneficial to me in my career, is that's allowed me to really understand my clients. And that's what I'm trying to do in these books, is give some depth to thinking things through. Everything we do nowadays are based on emotion. Mm-hmm. I guess it comes back to my political. One of the things I like to read about is geopolitical things, because I want to understand that. And what you're finding is that we're in this business where the two extremes have all the dialogue, extreme right and extreme left. Well, I'm in the middle. I think all answers are in the middle somewhere. And so tried to organize the group, the Order of the Extreme Moderates.
Interesting.
But the problem is, that's an oxymoron. Moderates are not extreme, but the result of which is that they get pushed down. Their word, their thoughts don't come out. And I think that's a kind of a failure of people to think through things and not do them on the basis of emotion. But it's a philosophical position.
2 final questions. We get the opportunity to interview a lot of leaders on the show here. We've all kind of concluded most leaders are readers, and their go-to book is typically found on their nightstand. What book's on your nightstand?
I have about 6.
Just give us
2 or 3 mystery books. A lot of them are about history. I love history, and particularly American history, because it's such a unique country compared to other countries, and so it's fascinating. McCullough books and Ambrose and those, they're around there, and I like to have fiction and nonfiction going at the same time. It depends on what I kind of feel like that, but I don't find it. One of the problems I have is I never seem to have enough time to read what I want to read, but those are the kind of things I try to read, because I'm trying to see the big picture, not the little pieces. How did we get where we got? And what is it we're losing? What is it that keeps us going? And those are just, and that's, I love to get around people that know something, because I want to understand. I guess what it amounts to is it being not being proficient in anything, but knowing a little about everything. So that's kind of my persona.
And I understand your books are now in social media, so if you spell your last name for folks, they can probably pull up your more information on.
It's Polansky. The big mistake most people think is that it ends in an I, but it's a Y, and I've been told that has to do with the Czechs tend to be a Y, and the Polish tend to be an I. And my background, my ancestry is from Czech, from the Bohemians.
Books on Amazon as well?
Yes, they are. They're on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And it's in a lot of the kind of aftermarket areas. I see it every once in a while, and on my personal website, I do handle some of it, but I prefer not to do that.
What's that website?
It's PolanskyBooks.com.
PolanskyBooks.com. Okay. Ed, thank you for coming on the show.
It's a real pleasure.
Sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Cedric.
All right. We'll see you all next time.